multitudes of them are in the trade show. I don't get that big check. Oh, well, they're all
Yes.
Well, my son.
Well, it wasn't any of the meetings.
I didn't send me secret stuff, whether I'm.
Hey, Vic. Yeah, we saw you. Just got back in the country. The guy sitting next to me was a friend of mine from high school. And we saw Tony walk by. He goes, that guy.
Boat driver wouldn't let him get on our boat.
That's what I read.
So
Apparently he got rather ugly about it.
two employees held his arm.
How about you? How you doing?
Very good. Just good.
Hey, Phil Curtis.
And that's a good thing.
Here. It's time. We start with that time?
You're supposed to be on cruise control.
Yeah.
He ain't gonna do that.
I know.
I got a new face at the end of the
Give him one bill.
Hey,
45 cents.
from this vantage point.
Yeah, but now they're in the presentation.
Yeah, musical chairs. And it's not a problem. It's not a problem.
That's me, Ty.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. So let's start with the welcoming everybody to the board meeting of February 21st. And we have a very special guest in the back corner there.
It's March 21st.
So let's all give a strong hello to Dr. Thomas. Okay, and I have next to me Mr. Lakakis, who I told him whenever I make a mistake here today to make sure that he pokes me. And he reminds me that this is March, not February. So thank you, Pete. That's the first time. Where's a ruler? So
Wow, that's awfully soon.
Didn't get very far, did I?
No, you didn't.
Okay, so first up is the roll call.
Good morning, everyone. Chairman French.
Here.
Ms. Stone. Mr. Broker.
Here.
Mr. Dawson. Mr. Dorrance.
Here.
Mr. Holmes.
Just arriving.
Mr. Jones.
Present.
Mr. Lakakis.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, which everybody has in their packets. So we need a motion.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
So we call for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. How'd I do, Pete?
Very good.
Okay, next
You
case.
listen, everything you've done before in the past has been great.
All right. So next up then is action items. We only have one action item today, Chris.
Yes, sir. Staff requests the board approve the purchase of naval engineering design services in connection with the rehabilitation of CAT's ferry boats. Naval engineering design assistance is needed to properly develop the IFB scope of work for repowering and refitting of the Florence Martis. Additional services provided will include the assistance with the IFB process to include input needed to answer potential bidder questions related to the ferry engine components and required rehab work. We solicited quotes from qualified vendors and received 2, and we've awarded it to John and Labbitt Incorporated, which is the lowest bid, and we did a price analysis for an independent cost estimate, and it was determined to be fair and reasonable. Funding is 80% covered by federal FTA funds. We received a grant, as you may remember, last year to cover rehabbing our boats, and this is the first one, and then the 20% local match is provided by the Trade Center.
Mr. Curtis,
Yes, sir.
I'm a bit curious about the differences in the amount of bid cost. It's about $37,000 difference.
I know, and so we, I agree.
Are we getting quality work here?
Yeah.
May I think probably the reason for the difference in cost is Jean and LeVay were the naval architects who designed the ferries to begin with. I think they've already got a lot of things in the can.
That is correct. And the other company was up in Connecticut, so their travel expenses and everything was, Jacksonville is only 2 hours away. Connecticut is a lot further, so travel, stay, airplanes, all the information that the Jean Bay can drive up here to get today, they're flying and going, so,
It did jump out at you.
yes ma'am, yeah, sure did, sure did. No, you good, I just want to confirm what you were saying.
Any other questions? Pete?
One of the things, because we've had problems with the ferry boats coming in and the people that were building them, some of them were slow, some of them made a lot of noise, and they had different problems with them and all. So what I'm just suggesting on it, Curtis, is that we make sure that they follow all the specifications and they're doing what they're supposed to do. Because on 3 different occasions, we had that problem with the people, either the ones that built it or the ones that were supposed to do the service on it also.
Yes, sir.
All right, so if there's no further questions, we need a motion and a second.
Second.
So, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item up on the agenda, Curtis, is presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we have RSNH here to do a status update of the origin destination study. They will offer a presentation to the board. Let's follow RSNH.
You want to give an intro? You want me to introduce myself? Good morning, everyone. Rachel Hatcher with RSNH. It's great to see you all again. And I see you survived St. Patrick's Day this weekend, so another one under the belt. Congratulations. So it's been about 3 months since we saw you last, and there has been an exceptional amount of work done in that time frame. So if you'll go to the next slide, Terry, we'll just jump in. I'm going to give you a project status update, as well as an overview of what we've been working on, including existing travel conditions that we were able to extract from the AirSage data, which, as a reminder, is cell phone-based data that the entire area of Chatham County and Richmond Hill were included in the study area. And we're going to look at service performance, meaning how that information interacts with your transit system, and potential markets. We'll talk about next steps, and of course, always questions and answers. Next slide, please. So since we saw you last, there's been some additional work done in developing the zonal structure, meaning identifying how we will share the origin and destination data when we get the AirSage data template in. And I'll show you an exhibit on that in the following slide. We completed the purchase on schedule and within budget, which also included that additional month of data. So the initial task was to purchase April of 2016. We extended that out to October with an agreement with CORE. That was all completed, again, on schedule and within budget. We performed extensive quality reviews, because if you've ever worked with AirSage data or a group that has purchased it, there can be some areas where there may need to be some tweaking done. So we did an exceptional amount of work there to make sure that the data was quality, so that every trend we're looking at has gone through that review. We analyzed the data and established your existing travel conditions, and then now we're doing ongoing and close coordination with your staff to make sure that the assumptions we're making and the recommendations that come out of that data analysis are in keeping with what you all know operating your system. Next slide. So to kind of put all of that into a digestible graphic, there's 3 primary forms of data that go into this analysis. There's the AirSage cell phone data that we use to identify travel patterns. Where are people starting from and going to? Are we providing service that can get them there? The next is census household or employment data, and saying, okay, are the majority of the people in this zone employed? Are they going to work, or are they working from home? And what is their demographic profile? Are they of the industry standard that would be the typical transit rider or choice rider, so that you can identify what service model would best serve the folks in those zones. And then the last is your CAT ridership data at the stop as well as the route level. So taking all of that travel behavior for everyone, irregardless of the mode they're traveling on, and drilling it down to comparison to your ridership statistics and saying, what % of those trips are we already getting? Are we getting our fair share of those trips, or is our service not aligning with what they're trying to do? And then you all will have a sheet, a handout that shows you 21 questions. We identified 21 questions in close coordination with your staff because there are so many possibilities of how you can slice and dice this data. And so we all sat together and said, what do we want it to tell us? How do we use this to best frame modifications to a transit system? And so those helped us identify draft findings as well as preliminary recommendations that we'll show you today. So don't get too excited. You did not pay for the extension of this data. We were able to coordinate and negotiate with AirSage to extend your study area out to the surrounding counties. That's very important because you would not have external to internal zone data. So you wouldn't know who was commuting in if you didn't have those zones. So we were able to negotiate getting those in for you at no additional cost. And that allows us to look at folks that are coming from fairly far out of your study area that unless you were extending transit service into surrounding counties, you wouldn't be able to capture them. They would come into your study area using their own mode of transportation. So that's the graphic. You can see we use the census data to identify the commuter travel patterns, where they're coming from for folks that work in Chatham County or Richmond Hill. And you can see you have folks traveling from a good distance around to get into Savannah for employment. Next
Not to interrupt you, but that's wonderful that you did that.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be really, really helpful.
You'll see a slide that shows it's a significant travel shed. It's important to have, and AirSage recognized that. So they were a very good partner in that respect. I can't speak highly enough for their team. And so the AirSage data, when it comes in, we showed you an example. It really is just a spreadsheet of numbers, but it also includes various details about the subscriber and the trip purpose. So, for instance, a resident worker, someone who lives within your study area and has a travel pattern that is consistent with your traditional 9-hour outside of the household at a consistent location every day. So they would say that's probably someone leaving their home and going to work. So those details are all included in the spreadsheet, but they're not mapped. They're just numbers. We have to bring them in and georeference them into these zones throughout the map. So you can identify in really a digestible way what that means. And so we analyzed the data, which consisted of 73 possible combinations of those details. So what are the people that are resident workers doing in the AM time period when they are traveling from home to work? Where are they going to? And then you slice it a different way. Okay, what about visitors in the AM period? Where are they going? Are they making trips in the midday or the AM peak more? So we looked at all 73 combinations to see what was the most meaningful. What are the travel behaviors in your study area consist of, and how do we get our fair share of those for transit, if you will? And so those travel behaviors were layered with your transit data as well as the census data, and you can see some snapshots of those in the maps there, where we're looking at transit propensity, or populations that are most likely to use transit services statistically, and then looking at how many possible trips are coming from that zone. Is there a match? We're looking for high trip opportunity and high transit propensity. We layer that with your transit service along with the activity, meaning how many people are getting on the bus in those areas, and we say, is there something that needs to be done? Is there great opportunity in low use, or is there great opportunity in high use? That zone is good, let's move on. So we analyzed each. You'll go to the next slide, please. So when you bring the AirSage data in and look at the travel behaviors, this is what you see. These are your origin trips. So the circles, the gray circles, represent the volume of origins, where people are leaving that zone in the morning time period, which is from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., and they're going from home to work. So these are your morning commute patterns, if you will. There's a lot that also falls into those categories, but really that's what you're after when you look at this data set. So this shouldn't be surprising. You've got a lot of residential areas out on the fringes and a lot of folks going into the Oglethorpe Mall zone. We don't want to say the Oglethorpe Mall because the zone is bigger. It contains surrounding activity. But that's really your largest activity area, is the Oglethorpe Mall zone as a destination. So folks are coming in from the fringes as well as the residential areas within the core of the study area. And then if you'll go to the next slide, Terry, there's their destinations. So you can really start to see where people are primarily going to for work purposes. So again, this is a direct comparison. That morning time peak, home-based work, resident workers, and this is their destination in comparison to the previous slide, which was their origin. So we look at those and we say, okay, the most substantive group of folks are coming from this area and going to this area. Now let's look at that in comparison to transit. Are we doing a good enough job getting them there? Next slide. And here's where those external zones come into play. You can see the same time period where we have inbound commuter, which is another one of those details in the spreadsheet that you get. The inbound commuter is the classification. It's from their home to work location for their trip purpose, and it's that AM peak again, that morning time period. So you can see those travel sheds coming in from adjacent counties. And again, I don't think that those that are familiar with traffic jams in the morning on the interstates would be very surprised by this information. Next slide. So we did that comparison for all 73 of the questions that you will have handed out to you so y'all can look at them. You can ask us questions about them. We're happy to answer in as much detail as you'd like about each of them. But what that does is it provides us with the framework to identify areas of concern, areas of issue with the performance of the system or mismatch of travel sheds and service models. And so we did these in tiers where we're going to further analyze and come to you with specific recommendations on how to make modifications to service that would be more in keeping with where people are trying to go. So tier 1, meaning there's a mismatch of where people are trying to go, but there's also significantly lower ridership in comparison to other routes. 3 came to the surface, which is Route 20, Skidway Island, Coffee Bluff, 11, Candler, and 100X, which is the Airport Express. So you'll see some specific recommendations come out about those. Again, I don't think that would surprise anyone. Those have been underperforming, and the AirStage data just confirmed that the folks that are trying to travel within the vicinity of that route are not being served for the trip purposes that they desire. Tier 2 is routes that are not underperforming. They're just overlapping with other routes. In some cases, overlapping with other routes that are underperforming. So there may be an oversaturation of transit options, and one of those options is the better one. So in that situation, you would have an obvious opportunity to realign that route or to eliminate one of the redundant routes and move it elsewhere. So we'll be looking in greater detail at Route 4, 6, Crosstown, 10, East Savannah, 12, Henry, and don't be surprised by 14. There's some great opportunity there because you can see there's extensive detail where you overlay the AirStage data in the graphic on the left, and you can see clear travel shed behavior. You can see that it's a very different system south of the Oglethorpe Mall Zone in comparison to north of the Oglethorpe Mall Zone, where south of the Oglethorpe Mall Zone, folks are scattering in from their homes to get to the core and transferring. North of Oglethorpe Mall Zone, it's a very direct shed. They're going to the downtown area to transfer the transfer center or get to employment opportunities. So when you have that very different travel behavior, you have opportunities to potentially, for instance, split a route and expand the service area in a different kind of way, just better serve the needs. And so we'll be looking at that level of detail for all of the routes in Tier 2 to say here are where those mismatches are, or here is where there's great opportunity for you to potentially do something a little different. Next slide. So very short list for next steps. Our timeline is coming to an end in May, June. So we'll be actively developing recommendations over the next several weeks. We anticipate a CAT board presentation to you all April or May, depending on your workload on your agenda, and then submitting the final report in May and June, letting you digest it and let us know if there's anything we need to tweak. So happy to answer any questions.
Be some questions this time. Helen?
When you get the data and your recommendations, are you going to meet with the staff so that you will have something concrete to present to us? In other words, here are our findings and here's what we recommend, not just here are our findings?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have had preliminary discussions with staff already, and we are working very closely with them to make sure that our final product is going to meet your expectations. Absolutely.
Because I think it's really important not only to know what's going on, but what are your suggestions to fix it? I mean, because when you look at our ridership report for this meeting, a little more than half of our ridership on all of our routes are down. So I want, yes, I want your suggestions, but I want to know how the staff analyzes that and says what, here it is, but what can we do about it? How are we gonna fix it?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Jay?
Can you restate how your external data was captured?
We expanded our study area to all of the zones that had census data where citizens within the zones outside of Chatham County, so let's use Liberty County for instance, when they reported the census, they said, I live in Liberty County, but my work address is in Chatham County. So you have that report in the census data that says, here are all of the counties that contribute to your employment, but that don't live within your study area. We pulled that report, we called AirSafe, we said, we need all of the trip behavior data for each of those counties. So we didn't disaggregate them. We didn't get all of the detailed zonal data that we got for you all. We just said, load them all into one zone for each of those counties and tell us who's coming in. And so it tells us what their classification is. They would be an inbound commuter. It tells us what their trip purpose was. Was it home-based work or was it home-based other? Did they go to the mall? And then it tells you what time of day they came in. And so it'll say they came in the midday peak or the PM peak. Okay, they're probably not coming into work. You know, so it gives us a lot of detail about the trip behaviors of those coming in from other counties into your county that do not live here.
And the other thing is, you said you had the information for us. When is that going to be available?
It's here now.
Okay.
And those are the 21 questions, and you will, of course, be provided a significant level of greater detail as we get closer to the final recommendations.
And Rachel, just to expand on that first point, when you all saw the external zones and how the trip behavior was coming into Chatham County, be aware that it's the centroid of each zone. So you saw a ton coming from Effingham County. It wasn't like one small community in Effingham County. That was just the whole entire county. It selected a centroid point in Effingham, and then how those individuals traveled into Chatham County. So I don't want anybody to get confused by that.
Thank you.
But it is a higher. It does give you a concentration number of how many people come from those areas, right?
Correct.
Curtis, I think you had a question?
I would like to know how specific you get to the time period, because you said 7 to 10 a.m. When we create schedules, we got to be more precise than that. So
Sure.
do you have it down to the 15-minute blocks, or I mean, how?
You can't get the AirSage data down to that level, but that's why we pull in your transit information. So we say, how is your system performing? And we have it at the route level, but we also have your sample data and the new information coming in from Abercorn as well as the downtown shuttle to compare to past information to make sure that we're bringing past data kind of up to speed on what the system is doing now. And so we say, okay, we have this at kind of a AM peak block. So we know generally people are traveling like this in this time period. But let's look at your transit route data at that level and say, where is there a disconnect? Obviously, there's tons of people flooding in, and the system's not getting any use here. So there's a disconnect. And that's where your expertise in working, cooperatively with your staff, we say, there's a disconnect, something needs to be fixed, we recommend doing this, and they say, now hold on, it does really well in the morning, it does really poorly at this time of day. And so then that's where we have that collaborative effort to make sure that we're drilling down far enough that we're making recommendations that are tangible.
Okay, and then the other question I had, if you could back up on the presentation to the external county one. There, right,
Go back.
So, obviously, Effingham County is huge as far as commuting. That's well, you have 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So I'm a little confused. Is that supposed to be 10 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay.
My apologies.
So within that 3-hour time block, that represents a lot of people, obviously. Now, do you have it detailed to show? Are they mostly coming in the 21? Are they mostly doing the 95? Or do you have any?
It does not go to the network. And
Okay.
so what we do have is exhibits where we overlay the road network there. Your local road network as well as your interstate and the various facility types lower than that. So we overlay that data with this information and we say they're going to use the highest use first, and then it's going to trickle down to the next and the next. So we say which of these zones, and we code them appropriately, which of these zones have access to what facilities. And so then we say, okay, zone 1 has access to the interstate. So they're going to primarily use the interstate, and they're going to get off of it at these points, and we have all of your interchanges highlighted on the routes as well. They're going to get off at these points, and they're going to go into the network. And we have your local network underlaid into there as well. So we we say if they get off here and they're going here, and this is the primary work location, which we have as well, then we can start to see those travel behaviors emerge. So it's not a direct science where I can say we coded it this way. We use our professional judgment, pull in all that information and say, this is the logical travel shed. You can also code this in a travel demand model, which you do have through CORE. So we do have that data as well, and we do kind of a high-level comparison and say, yes, this makes sense. Yes, this travel pattern and behavior is consistent with what we're seeing from the travel demand model.
Do I have to raise my hand to ask a question, Pete?
No, you good, boss.
I'm not sure how I do this.
You don't have to do that.
How many, do you have raw data as to how many people come in from Bullitt County?
We do have the numbers. I cannot quote those to you. I will get them to you, but absolutely. We have all of the external to internal trips, and you can select just the numbered zone and say what numbered zone is Bullitt County. This is how many trips.
Can you do that for all the counties?
Absolutely.
I think I'd be interested, I don't know if the rest of the board would, I wouldn't mind seeing the raw data.
Yeah, I would
We have it
too.
in a spreadsheet that maybe you could send us, and
Absolutely.
just to give us thinking on this process. I think this is really, really interesting. And I like the way you seem to be able to identify routes where we're doubling up or tripping over each other, which I think is our perception that we're doing that. So this is wonderful.
Very helpful.
Maybe you already get this, but as part of your data collection, could you get, and would it be useful to get traffic counts on roadways from GDOT?
We have them. We do have a significant amount of data that we're able to pull in because CORE has done their long-range transportation plan update, and so a significant amount of information was already available through SAGES.
So that should help you delineate, instead of just a centralized location for
Sure.
those counties, which roads are using coming up.
And I'm going to tout some additional work. I'm not going to put you in the hot seat too much today, Jane, but they are also doing their congestion management process update, which was why the partnership worked so well for them to purchase the additional month of data for their use as well as ours, because they're doing exactly that. They're looking at corridors with number of trips as well as areas of congestion. So we sit in on those meetings to make sure that we're listening to areas where there may be difficulty providing transit service because of congestion, and we say, okay, that needs to be considered. Are there any plans to expand this road network? Okay, how would that impact transit? So we make sure that we're having that good coordination with them as well, so that all of the traffic counts are taken into consideration as well as any improvements that may benefit the system.
Really interesting. Any other questions or comments before we move on?
It's really
The
good.
people that you question, did they tell you the preference, or you get information from them? How can we help you?
For the riders, this
Yes.
process did not include a public outreach or public participation element. That would very likely be brought in during your next transit development plan update, where you would have to have that public interface. So this is wayfinding and data analysis without, that's right, just looking at how people are behaving, and the benefit of that is that we have representation from everyone that has a cell phone. When you go and reach out to the public, which will be in the very near future, that you get a sample, and you can use that sample of what people are saying to you in comparison to what we see, and you have both sets, so you can kind of fact check, because you can't catch everyone with public input, but you can take that sample and say, do we see that? Does that match? And if it does, that's great. And if it doesn't, you can say, okay, let's take this with a grain of salt. This may have been one special interest group, but we're not seeing what they're saying.
One thing I find interesting in this is that the people coming in from Effingham County and from the farther counties are not necessarily coming into downtown Savannah. They're going into the Overshort Mall.
Right.
So we're going to have to be thinking when we get to this point that we're going to have to go down 516 and not into Transit Center, which is going to add a new wrinkle to your
Sure is.
We've had the very same conversations with the same look on our faces. When some of these travel patterns emerge, sometimes they lead to very difficult secondary conversations.
Any other questions or comments before we move on?
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. So next up is Curtis, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Executive Director's Report, as well as the backer report and the report from Squire Patton and Boggs is in your packet. packet, as well as an additional, for your reading pleasure, the information on the new administration. I would like to point out, though, the fare box recovery ratio is down as we would expect. The trims and the motherboards, as we've been talking about, have all come in. We did have an issue with the motherboards that they had to be reprogrammed. They've been working hard in maintenance to install all of them, and we should have them all installed by Wednesday.
Probably middle of April, we're about 48% done. We had to get GFI to remote in and help us do some reconfiguring on the motherboards and the probing. So it's moving along pretty good now.
Okay. I would also like to point out real quick,
One question.
Yeah.
When we gonna have it completely to a better percentage? That's what I'm asking.
Well, as soon as so middle of April, you said it'll all be installed?
Middle of April, we should be
and then once
completely installed. And we'll have GFI remoting in a couple more times to make sure the system is working like it's supposed to. And right now, all of our laptops have the program, and it's working real good right now.
And then once that's done, Mr. Jones will start tracking the data comparable to before they were installed.
Appreciate it.
I would also like to point out, we only have 4 more months left in this fiscal year, and our preventable accidents, if you notice, is tracking very well. And that's a testament to our safety culture and our Director of Safety, Eric Franklin. We've been doing really well this year compared to last year, and I just want to make sure that's highlighted. I know accidents at the bottom line in a hard way sometimes, but this year has been very good to us.
Helen, I think you had a question?
No, I was hoping that, and obviously he's in Atlanta, but I was hoping Mike was gonna be here to give us any update on any of this information. But I think he referred to there's gonna be some action taken this afternoon.
10 days ago.
There are 2 weeks left, yeah, the last day is the 30th, so a lot of things are going to be happening over the next few weeks. Mike unfortunately had to go to DC, but I will make sure that as we close in on these last few legislative days, that if he has an update, I will have it spread to the board via email or something.
Or
that
if we need to make any phone calls.
Or you can
anything.
a call or something. But yeah, we're getting down to the last few days, and a lot of things are on the table.
Bill?
They didn't mention it in the Patent Box summary, what to expect from President Trump. But I saw something somewhere in his skinny budget that it was like FAST and Tiger are going to take a hit. How is that going to impact us? Do you need a sense of that at all?
Well,
I'm sorry, not FAST, START.
Yes, if the small starts, new starts, and Tiger grants take a hit in the new budget, that will impact us as far as doing some kind of a streetcar or something like that, sure.
Curtis, you were in DC for the legislative conference.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to update us on the thinking of everybody in the FTA? It would be an interesting
Yeah, it's
update
interesting.
for us.
So, there's a lot of people that really don't know what's going to happen. We kind of all knew that. I did speak to the executive director of the FTA, and they're doing their job. They're moving forward, but they don't know what's going to happen. But the budget itself is kind of a hot topic right now. The threat of Tiger grants and small starts and new starts is, that's certainly on the table. As far as how much funding will go to transportation, nobody really knows. It's kind of a wait and see game. I know President Trump talked about infrastructure a lot, but didn't really hone in on what his idea was for transit or transportation in general. So it's one of those wait and see kind of things, which is, it hurts us. I know the FTA is doing only a partial funding for us, for any agency. They're not going to commit to the year, which hinders us. It does. It's hopefully something will be done soon, but it's interesting. Even the people in the know don't know. So
are we looking for anything to offset that just in case it happens?
Well, we're going through our budget process right now. We certainly need to look at the risk involved if that doesn't happen. I can't imagine that ending completely, because there would be a lot of systems, not just ours, that would suffer tremendously. So I wouldn't know. I wouldn't necessarily go to that extreme, but if grant funding opportunity is eliminated for projects that are large projects, for us in our sphere, it would definitely impact any kind of a streetcar type project, which would also impact a lot of other agencies as well. Especially agencies that have started projects and are looking for continued funding. If they don't get it, then they're going to have to figure out how to complete those projects on their own.
But more along Jay's question, I think it was 2 years ago, the grants got delayed.
When the government shut down,
Yes.
we were right at the point of having a grant executed, and we went 30 days without the ability to pull about $6 million. Right now, our FY17 5307 has reached its final stage. We expect the partial apportionment to be awarded within the next 30 days, 7/12 of our annual apportionment. And by June, we should hear that they're going to move forward with the other 5/12.
And lack of not busy, are there any projects out there that may get delayed or anything out there?
We don't have any large capital projects ongoing. This money is operating assistance. So once we get past the June or July and haven't had the 5/12 notice of funding, there could be some concerns. But the one for the first 7 months of FTA funding is on its way to execution.
Okay. And I was gonna, and Curtis, is that what you were alluding to earlier when you said that transportation is unwilling to commit?
Yeah.
For the other half year or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so they're calling it a partial apportionment, so only for the first half of the year they're willing to commit. Again, it's a wait and see game. We'll probably have another update on that by the April board meeting, because things are keep moving. From what I understand, nothing's going to really move until the repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act goes into effect, because they're claiming that that's going to drive the rest of the budget and all that. So we'll have to continue to wait, unfortunately.
Any other questions? The next up is unit update and ridership.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Grant, you want to go ahead and give the ridership update?
Sure. Morning, everyone. We've had a few months in a row now with low ridership productivity, but I am happy to report a healthy passengers per hour figure for February 2017. On your monthly ridership report, on that table on the first page, you will see that we had 19.5 passengers per hour for our core routes. That is up 0.7% compared to February 2016 core routes. So I saw that as a good sign. I can't tell you that I know exactly why we were up after 3 pretty poor months in a row. Again, must have something to do with travel patterns or fuel prices or something. Could also have something to do with the fare box. The fare box is starting to be maintained a little bit better. On the last page of the ridership report, and I just wanted to note that this is one of those interesting months where we actually had a decrease in raw ridership, but an increase in ridership productivity or efficiency. That's because 2016 was a leap year, so we had an extra day in 2016, and so we obviously had more passengers in 2016. But in terms of these hours that we put on the streets, when you normalize the data, that's where you saw an increase in productivity. So how we had been looking at the data about a year ago, we would have said, oh, we were down 3%, that's not good, but actually when you compare using the service hours, we're actually doing okay. For non-core routes, we did not do very well. That's in the bottom of that table. We were down 47% on productivity. Again, and I mentioned this last month too, but SSU is going through a repavement project right now, and it's really throwing the circulation on campus for a loop. So a lot of students are probably choosing to walk because it's going to be faster than actually taking the shuttle. So that's why we see a pretty significant decline there. Also wanted to point out that the Prowler, which is on here, this will be the last month that you see the Prowler because we are no longer running that service. And then the 100X, the Airport Express, I'm thinking that next month I'm going to move this up into the core routes because we do not receive any subsidy from any outside partner for that service. So I feel like we should treat it as one of our own. Now granted, it's an express service, so it's going to have a different passengers per hour target probably than the rest of our routes. But I just wanted to lump it into the same category because we should consider it as one of our own, not a partnership route. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them. Yes, ma'am.
So you're working very closely with the study to analyze these routes and what routes may or may not need to not be?
Yes,
and
ma'am.
And any overlapping, because when I look at this report, to me it's still not where it needs. It's far from where it needs to be.
I think back off what you're saying. You got 7 routes that haven't hit the target at all in the course of a year.
That's right.
So with that being said, and what she said actually can tie into what can give us information about it. So I agree totally.
Yeah, and we've been in close coordination with RSNH. I mean, this is the baseline data that helps us recreate, our system to suit the needs of the community. So we're looking at this data every single day, trying to learn whatever we can in preparation for any future changes that we have.
And the cost per passenger, what are we trying to get it at? I mean, I might have missed that.
So the cost per passenger figure, basically what we do with that is we estimate the cost of the service by multiplying our cost per hour, which is $96 per hour, multiplying that times the number of service hours. So that gives us an idea of how much that each route costs per month, and then we divide it by the number of passengers that actually use that route. So
to decrease the number, like the 2692, we've actually decreased the amount of time we spend with the on that route, or low ride. I mean, I know
there are a couple ways to decrease the cost per cost per passenger. You can either increase the passengers or you can decrease the cost. It's one or the other. And the Route 20 has been one of those routes that just has an incredible cost per passenger. Historically, yes. And Route 11 too. Those have been very, very high for a long time. And again, RSNH mentioned that in the report. Those are kind of those tier 1 routes that we're taking a very close look at as to how can we improve along those corridors. Is it an Uber partnership or a Lyft partnership, or is it a flex route? Or I mean, we're putting everything on the table, trying to figure out what to do with those routes.
Can we also talk a little bit about the Airport Express? This is one of the ones that what troubles me quite a bit. Because I think when we talk about our core routes, we realize we're dealing with members of the community that don't have cars and they need us to get from A to B. And we expect that we're going to be subsidizing these fairly heavily. But for me, the Airport Express, as it's set up, is supposed to be bringing tourists into town. And I don't think we should be subsidizing that quite as much. And when I look at the Airport Express at the numbers we're showing, if I look at your raw data, you carried 900 people last month. So if we use the $5 average, which I'm not sure even that's correct, because now you've got a $5 one way and $3 one back, and I'm not sure how many citizens are using that just to get to work to the airport. But we're bringing in maybe $4,000 a month. And for $96, this thing is costing us, I think I did some quick arithmetic, like $28,000. So if we multiply that times 12, I think this route is costing us somewhere around $400,000. And we talked about this several times, and there's always we're going to have a plan, but we never see the plan, and it never gets any better. And for me, it's one of these things we keep talking, and we're not getting there. So we need, in my mind, we need something that's either going to make this work, or maybe it's just not worth $400,000 to bring people into Savannah. We could probably have an Uber cat, for a lot cheaper than this.
Yeah, and just to touch on one of those points, so we do put out a lot of service hours on the 100X, actually more than Route 11 and Route 20 combined per month. So when we look at Route 20 and Route 11 and say that we're struggling there, our passengers per hour is actually much lower on the Airport Express, and we're putting out more hours there. So that is definitely an area of concern. And we've actually mapped out the arrivals and departures coming into the airport, and it's really about 2 arrivals, 2 departures per hour. So the airport doesn't see a whole lot of volume, and when you think of how many passengers are on each plane, what percentage are we looking for to get from each plane that comes in? Then you factor in the actual time it takes for us to get out there, and it just gets really, really challenging from a transit perspective to design an effective, useful service that will get people to and from the airport from downtown.
Yeah.
So I understand your point about maybe trying to do something else. We've also thought about, passengers coming to downtown, is this the right spot to drop them off? Should we be doing a loop around downtown to get them to their actual hotels? That's an idea as well, but you're right, we do need to do something.
Maybe at some point in the near future, maybe the next time we get together, we could come up with a plan that maybe involves trying to get the hotels to kick in or something. I mean, this, for me, just is not, I would rather take this money and put it back into the main routes and maybe increase our service in a few of them to try to help our poor passengers more.
We'll figure out
than
what
trying to
kind of
subsidize our tourists who have other options to get here. Just my opinion. Ellen, you were.
Well, piggyback on what you're saying, but also when I've ridden buses from airports in other communities when I'm traveling for whatever reason, they're never an express. They stop all throughout. And so, are there enough people going to that side of town that I think this was brought up in the study, that we can combine this, because we're not, as you so perfectly said, I mean, tourists are not using this for whatever reason. Is it because they're bringing them here and not to their hotels? But the ones that I've ridden have numerous stops along the way. So I think that having a quote express is not, we're wasting a lot of money. Where are there people trying to get to that side of town that can use the airport route to get to where they need to be?
Was it originally designed for tourism?
That's a good question. I believe so.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, because the 3 goes to the airport too, doesn't it?
The three gets near the airport, and that's
far?
Another
Could go to
alternative.
the
We could
airport.
potentially
Right.
add a stop on the
It used to
airport.
service the airport 3.
Right. And so that is an alternative. If we wanted to remove the 100X and just pull it
Extend
back
the 3.
into the airport, we wouldn't lose that connection to the
And then
airport.
you save that.
It would give us a lot of hours to spread.
And then that's
elsewhere.
our time you can spread, yeah.
Listen, is anybody checking to see how the taxi drivers, what they are doing is they try to get you away, or they send you got somebody, they send one of the cabs up, and to see that, because I saw when I came back from the Savannah day on that, and I got off that time element, that it was a little different than going on to watch them in the beginning.
Taxis wouldn't be your competition. Lyft and Uber would be more of a concern,
Right.
I'm not trying to take you out.
The taxis have the outer curb, and
Yeah.
we actually have the inner curb. So we have a better spot.
We have a better spot.
But to your point,
Uber and Lyft
can
will be
go
your
to the inner
competition.
curb. And so, most airports do not allow taxis to lobby for rides.
Taxis usually have to volley in an order.
They're not allowed to do that.
But Uber doesn't.
Bill, what are we doing to tell people that the service is available?
I was gonna ask you.
Cause it's parked down at the end of the curb, you walk out, you don't see it, you get off the plane, pick up your luggage at LaGuardia, and you walk out, that bus is sitting right there when you walk out the door, so you're very aware, with a sandwich board sign sitting right next to it saying X amount dollars into the city. Are we doing anything like that to let people, passengers coming off the flights know?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the sandwich board. I mean, we met with the airport sometime last summer, I think, and we talked about that briefly. And their response was something along the lines of they can't treat any one service unfairly. They have to just show the options. But you know, to your point, that Uber has a sandwich board and we don't. That's something that we might want to bring up with them. But I don't know, Shalonda, did you want to mention some of the specifics on?
I agree. We talked to them about that. The things that they have just said is that we would be responsible for bringing out the sandwich board, that they didn't have the staff to bring it out, you know, daily or when our service wasn't running, when it ends in the evening. So they didn't have anyone to dedicate it to, you know, put it up every evening and then bring it back out. So
If they let us stop right in front of the door, then the driver can just step off and set it. So, I mean, they're not really trying to help with this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're actively not helping.
But to the point where how Uber and Lyft, when I go to the airport anywhere, I go Uber and Lyft and I don't even look for any other transit. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier. If this was geared toward visitation or visitors, then we're losing out on Uber and Lyft regardless.
Yeah, and the other problem we have with it, Jay, is that we're treating this, since we are a transit company, we treat this as a bus route.
And
So we leave on the hour and we get there and we're there for 5 minutes.
Correct.
So if you can't get off the airplane, get your luggage in the 5-foot window, you call Uber or Lyft or you take a cab. So I think the way we're trying to run this, which is what we do, is self-defeating. So unless we can come up with a different plan, I agree with Jay. I mean, you're going to get out, you're going to call Uber. I mean, I really do. So I think this is a difficult challenge for us because we have to be there. And you know, I traveled quite a bit, and unless you're sitting in first class in one of the first few seats, you're not going to make it before our bus drives out. You're going to see the taillights. And if you've got to get your luggage, by the time you get your luggage, you've got to wait for half an hour for the bus to come back. And nobody's going to wait. And I think that's our challenge.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, we've talked about this route, it seems like, ever since it got up and going. And all of us have offered suggestions with the sandwich board, with the timing, with where we put the bus, you know, all that sort of thing. And it's either going to work or it's not. You know, it seems to me that if staff can't come up with a plan to make this service work, then we ought to let the service go. I mean, it's just not getting it.
I think that's a very good summary, Bill.
Can we get a full
and we
pulse
put the money
analysis?
back in our.
There are other places we could spend it.
So when do we make the call on that? How long do we keep talking about this before we make that call?
You need to get a cost analysis on to see how it's actually benefiting or not benefiting.
But I think it'll also be interesting to see the RSNH report, the origin destination study, because it's one of those tier 1 routes. If there are any suggestions from those travel patterns as to, you know, how we can reconfigure it. But I mean, if they tell us that it's going to be kind of challenging or it's going to cost more money or something to add more frequency, then maybe we just scrap it and try to come up with an alternative.
Yeah, I think that another thing we should do, and you could do it from here, since the bus leaves from here, is see who's on this bus when it goes to the airport. I'd like to see if it's tourists or if it's people that work here. And that would be something we can do fairly easily.
They have luggage or not?
They have luggage or not.
Yeah, that's easy.
And I think we can also go out when the bus gets back and see if they have luggage or not. And I think if we find that a good part of this 900 people are actually working with the airport, then maybe we reroute number 3. And we take them that way. But I think we just give this thing a couple, 3 more months. And without a plan and without any real hope, I think that it's time to really talk about reinvesting in our core routes.
But I think we want to do it in
as you said, we've talked about it forever and ever, and we're going to get all this data from here.
Have we done any marketing with the hotels so that they tell their clients when they're checking out that this is a service available?
That's been discussed.
We've talked about it. Are we doing that?
Yes, we have, Mr. Frank, as you had said, I think that our greatest challenge is just not being able to connect to the other hotels. So those that are in the area, the embassy, of course, people can walk to those locations, with luggage, but then there is a challenge for those that are a little further, where we have a lot of development downtown of newer hotels that, when people can obviously get Uber and Lyft, they can bring their luggage on and be dropped in front. That's certainly our competition as opposed to being able to walk. We are trying to promote connecting to, if you catch the airport shuttle, to be able to connect to the dock. That certainly helps people, but that's just one of our challenges with the hotels that are not in the area.
And being a traveler, and traveling with my wife who travels heavy, connecting to another shuttle is a negative, because you don't want to have suitcases, you have to get them off one bus onto another bus. And then we go back to Jay's comment, they just call Uber and get it over with from the start.
Yeah, and time's an issue.
So
So
time's
when
an
we've been
issue.
talking about that Sandfly, I'm not Sandfly, but the Coffee Bluff route, I mean, by the time you do all of that, you could have just driven and paid parking or used Uber.
Okay, so maybe you can give some thought and come up with a last gasp plan, and also try to do our survey for us and look at the people getting on and off the bus and see if they really are tourists.
By next month, I'll have an estimate breakdown of tourists versus residents.
And I think for James' comment too, I mean, I did this sort of roughly, but if you could give us a better costing and a better yearly cost to us, it'd be better. Okay, so then, any more questions about ridership? Because I think we're moving on to new business. Do we have any new business?
Status updates.
Curtis reminded me, status updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the service delivery update in your board packet. We'll answer any questions if anybody has any. Or information on it.
You talking about where it starts with communication?
Tab number 7?
Yeah.
Actually, I do have
I got a few questions too.
Yeah, I don't know.
You good?
On the paratransit report, maybe I'm just missing it, but we were getting some information about cancellations and no-shows, and I didn't see that.
Yes, sir. What we've discovered is that a lot of the data was being grouped into no-shows. So if the customer's not ready, it was being classified as no-show in the system. So we're working to separate all that out, and we'll be able to give you better data next month. I didn't want to give you data that wasn't comprehensively accurate. So that's something that we decided that instead of giving you bad data, let's separate those out instead of grouping them all into a no-show category, because it makes the no-show category look really bad when in fact they weren't a no-show.
They were just late.
Or they weren't ready. A lot of times when they go on the dialysis machine, when they get done, there's a waiting period that they have to, before they can get on the vehicle. And so, depending on when they booked the travel time and the window that they received, it could have been off. And we're working with these customers to make sure that their appointment times more closely resemble after the waiting period, so that they're not. And then again, sometimes that data is being put as no-show when it's not a no-show. They just weren't ready and they cannot travel at that time.
Helen?
Thank you. Being somewhat concerned about the budget and looking at the employment activity, we've hired 11 people. I understand that 5 were let go. Can you tell me so that was 6 new employees possibly, what were they hired for?
I don't have that detail with me, but Sheila's here and she can certainly expand on that.
Our 5 terminations from last month included 1 cleaner who resigned, a transit ambassador who resigned because he was out of state, 2 new Telluride drivers. We had a new Telluride driver class. One of those resigned during the orientation within a couple of days because she was offered another position in May. The second one, 2 days after that, resigned because her brother was tragically killed. And we had 1 involuntary termination in the
Well, I was more concerned about the hires, actually, because in looking at the budget, you know, do we have the money to be hiring 11 people? I mean, I realize you lost some, and so I'm just trying to find out what the need for the new employees was.
The new hires were replacement. We are also hiring some new people that won't reflect until this March report, because we've eliminated 2 contractual or contracts that we've had in place. But those new hires were replacement positions.
So landscape solutions and hands-on cleaning, so the bus detailing and the landscaping work that we've been paying $11,000-12,000 per month.
Yeah, it's still in here.
Our last payments are in there,
February was the last
but we
one.
had to start the hiring process and hire people to onboard them so that we can do that job ourselves in-house.
That's great, and that's what I want to know is, you know, obviously we hired some additional people. If that's to save money, that's great. But I was just very concerned when I'm looking at the bottom line on some of these figures, but yet we're hiring people, so it just didn't make any sense. That's why I asked.
To piggyback on what she's saying, I'm more concerned about the non-bargaining, as far as the 4 people for the non-bargaining side.
And they're all budgeted FTEs, they're not new positions. So they're new hires, but
That's what
not
you-
new
that's what you-
positions.
Just needed to know.
It
Thank
is
you.
replacement.
Okay, but I'm very glad that you all were looking at doing some of this stuff in-house.
Right.
And saving some money there and getting us on our feet.
And we're trying to postpone the new hire to kind of lengthen the gap of the
Correct.
cost savings, so.
How many positions we got open?
Total positions?
Yeah.
Approximately 6.
Bargaining side, how many do we have?
that's in?
The majority of them are on the bargaining units.
Okay.
We just hired a new chief operating.
Yeah.
He decided, the promotion came from what department?
The promotion was from paratransit Telluride driver to the maintenance department. It was a bargaining unit position, both of them. Moved from to a promotion.
When was the last time Cat did a diversity study?
It's been several years.
Can we look into that?
And now, what's all that? On page 8, where it said,
Let me get my answer, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, brother.
Let me get my answer on that first.
Yes.
Cat, oh, yeah.
I thought you said, that's why.
I didn't hear nobody.
Okay.
I didn't hear you.
I read it, man.
Okay.
All right, on page 8,
I've got it on my list.
on where it says scheduled projects, I mean, I see where it says scheduled projects and completed projects. There's no detailed listing as far as costs. And when I look at these things, they seem like a task-oriented type thing. These seem like every month we should be doing these things anyway. When I look at, facility maintenance, I'm looking for, especially in these projects, I'm looking for something that's going to rebuild a brand new garage because we needed a new garage. Or when I look at projects, these seem like tasks. Can you expound on that?
Would you like to have tasks and projects, or just simply?
I mean, if these are going to be tasks, that's fine. But they're listed as projects, but they seem more like tasks. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
Because bathroom repairs, those are tasks. If a bathroom is broken, of course, we're going to repair it on a monthly basis. That's a task. But a project would be we rebuilt a bathroom somewhere else, or we restructured something, or we redesigned something. That would be more like a project.
Yeah, we can certainly clarify that more.
And then, and if they are, when we get into projects, can we list, I guess, costs associated? Because we're trying to, keep an eye on money, so we want to make sure we keep an eye on budget on everything.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Then we move on to system development update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The system development update is in your packet. We have staff here to answer any questions you may have.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I want to note that I inadvertently omitted one page of the system development report. It's just a page of images that directly correlates with marketing.
Thank you.
No questions? Then, financial update, Terry.
Good morning. The financial update is in your package. Of note, February was a good month to date. We are ahead of budget, and that helped close our projected year-to-date deficit. We, on our projection, are down to right at 80,000 negative. So with the cost containment measures that we discussed and implemented through the end of June, we should make budget and be dead even. I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.